Oh, tell me all about Anne Olivia. I want to hear all about Anne Olivia. Well, you know Anne Olivia? Yes, of course, we all know Anne Olivia. Tell me all. Tell me now. You'll die when you hear. Well, you know what the old Cheb went futt and did what you know? Yes, I know. Go on. Wash quit and don't be dabbling. Tuck up your sleeves and loosen your talk tapes, and don't butt me. Hike when you bend, or whatever it was they threed to make out the thride of the two in the fiendish park. He's an awful old rep. Look at the shirt of him, look at the dirt of it. He has all my waters black on me, and it's steeping and stooping since this time last wick.
Hey everyone, it's Ben again. Boom! And today we're going to be reviewing a book that I've been wanting to read for a long time that had multiple false starts, and that is the toughest book I know, Finnegans Wake. So I have to say some preambles first before I get into it. First, yeah, this copy's beaten the hell. This is the one with the corrections. The Barnes & Noble's one is a first edition that doesn't have corrections. I don't know if you would notice it or not, but if you want to be, I guess, as authentic as possible, go for this version. Two, it may not be the toughest book. Bottom's Dream and Larva may be up there. However, I'd probably say after reading this book, I don't think anybody really compares to Joyce. And also, those two books are within the shadow of Joyce as well, and they're copying a lot of the stuff that Finnegans Wake is doing. Future Ben here. If you like this video and want to see me do more crazy books like this, please leave a like and subscribe. It will help the channel a lot and keep me motivated to do this stuff. Future Ben here. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. It will keep me doing these crazy ass novels, and it just helps with the channel knowing that there's people watching. Editing Ben here. Also, I have a super hipster story regarding reading this book, so wait to the end of this video. And also, I have a story how I'm an idiot as well. So, when I first came across this book, I was trying to read Ulysses and everything. I might have just finished, and I read like the first couple of sentences of the first page of this book, and I got mad. I was like, what the hell is this book? Who would write this? Like, who would want to read this? This is so aggravating. Like, come on, just write something normal. And then, the more it sat in my head, the more I thought about it. Because, I liked complicated literature, but this seemed like too out there for me. But the more I was like, you know what? It's really cool that this exists. Somebody put 17 years of their life into this novel. They made it so crazy and complicated. Like, it's almost like a black hole of literature just sitting there, just like irritating us all. So, I eventually tried to read it. It took me like, I think it's my 4th or 5th attempt starting it. The furthest I got into before was just 80 pages because it is a difficult novel. And I read this over the course of a little bit of a year. Some of my literary burnout happened when I started, actually right when I started reading this book. I finished The Tunnel, I started Finnegans Wake, and I was like, oh my god. I think this book is an okay book to take breaks from as well. Also, this book went to Africa with me, so you'll see some images from Malawi and specifically the town of Blantyre. Another thing, I read this without any references. I was initially using the Joseph Campbell guide, but I started to notice around chapter 2 is that it's not really the most helpful to me because Joseph Campbell is trying to go for a more one-to-one literal plot analysis, which I think is the wrong way to read this book. And so he was saying that this section takes place, like chapter 2 takes place in a courtroom, and I just was not able to find that courtroom whatsoever. And I felt like I was missing a lot of what was happening on the page by trying to find what Joseph Campbell was saying. So when I let myself just be taken by the book and the rhythm of it, I felt like I understood a lot more on a scene-by-scene basis. And also, forgive me if there's any mistakes or I miss a lot of stuff. This is a book that needs to be understood on multiple rereads, and there's just a ton to this book. And again, I read it over the course of the year, so some things may be fuzzy here or there, but from other people I've talked to, like getting a 10-20% understanding is considered pretty good from this novel. So, what is this book about exactly? Well, that's really difficult to say and very contested. But the main overarching themes is that this book takes place within a dream. The dreamer is not stated, and the plot follows a man, kind of, called Finnegan. That's where the title of the book comes from, Finnegans Wake, because it comes from the Irish Bar song where a man named Finnegan dies and they pour alcohol and bring him back to life. But it also has to deal with HCE, who is a figure that takes multiple personas and characters throughout the novel. The plot gets really messy after that. Other things it knows for is its extreme use of puns, a lot of puns that you've never even seen before. Most of them are, or all of them are original, where Joyce combines two words into one, sometimes words even from different languages, and he'll have whole sections just based off this. It's actually more rare to see normal words in this book. And another key aspect of the novel is that it is cyclical, so it never ends. The ending of the novel bleeds into the beginning of the novel. But yeah, if that doesn't really sound like I described anything, welcome to Finnegans Wake. So, there's really no proper nouns in the traditional sense in this novel. And what I mean by that is that, much like a dream, and this is why I don't think there should be a one-to-one interpretation of this novel from my reading, is that the same name will fluctuate throughout multiple different characters throughout this novel. So there's multiple different entities that hold the name HCE. And there's multiple different interpretations of what HCE means. The one everybody knows is, here comes everyone. Another one is that sometimes he'll actually add proper names to it, like, I forget it, but one example would be, if the top of my head, be like Herbert Costello Edward. I know that's not in the novel, but there's a lot of different things like that. Even things like the Print Queen will sometimes be referenced as a real historical figure within the novel. And then sometimes it's also designated as a title. Like this woman is the Print Queen. Kind of like the word Messiah in the sense. Now imagine if Messiah could also be like the name of somebody, but also Messiah could be like a designation. Like, hey, there's multiple Messiahs. It's a messianic figure that has come here. It could also be like just a one-to-one, like, yeah, that person is the Messiah. So you have to look at names like that. Even the name Finnegan, it is reference to a very specific character at the beginning of the novel, going after the song, but then later on it's attributed to different people, and it's even used as a pun, where it's Finn again. And almost, if I'm not mistaken, a designation to an action that happened or something like that. So not even referencing somebody. The term Humpty Dumpty comes up a lot, but Humpty Dumpty's not even really a person in this novel. So again, these names, these proper nouns, are more fluctuating. Now, there are names in the novel, but there's not really a named character per se, aside from like variations of HCE and Finnegan. Now, there are names in the novel, but a lot of the time it's more used as setting or window dressing in a sense. So while there are characters with names like Finnegan and different variations of HCE, a lot of the times, this is just my interpretation, it's used as setting in the sense like, think about where I'm at now. We have the sand, we have the waves, we have a railing behind me, it's dawn, there's clouds in the sky. It's like the Umberto Eco postmodernist idea of list, where a lot of postmodernists will just list off a bunch of things, and that will give you a proper mood and idea of where you're at, just by not even using adjectives, but again, like just using basic nouns. I think he's doing the same thing, but with more proper nouns and specifically names, because you'll see a lot of passages where it'll just be a list of proper names. First, middle, initial, and last. Now, I think he's also doing the Pinchonian thing of a lot of these names are puns and means other things. a lot of that went over my head if that is there. But if I had to wager a guess, he's describing the setting and the mood just through those names. And think of it like this, because he's using a lot of Irish names. But if you juxtapose that with a lot of Spanish names like Vasquez, Raul, Tito, you'd get a different idea of where you're at and a different interpretation. Take it a step further. Right now, just in your head, make a list of a lot of your friends. Now make a list of your coworkers. Now make a list of your family members. Now make a list of internet personalities. Now make a list of authors. If you use all those different lists, you're going to get a totally different vibe for yourself. And then the quality of names could also give you a vibe as well. So a lot of the names he uses, it's first, middle, initial, last name. That gives it more of like, kind of like a regal, proper feel. So for example, if I just say James, okay, that's kind of more just like everyday kind of common thing. James Joyce. Oh, okay, that sounds more like an author name or something more proper that you would use. Now, this is not his name, but let's add some stuff. What if it was James Joyce Beauregard, writer of Dublin III? Okay, well, now we have a much different quality to the name. So just even based on the usage of the name and how he presents the name, gives you a certain quality to what is happening and what mood he's trying to set within the scene itself. And that's what I believe those lists are for. I could be totally wrong, but to try to add a one-to-one, this is this character, this is that character, or even this is HCE at this time, this is HCE at that time, you're gonna go crazy because a lot of the characters don't even have necessarily a proper characterization. They're more like myths or fables in the old school sense of literature, where it's meant to show possibly a certain virtue, a certain idea, or it's just supposed to be a placeholder where we can see this character go through the action. A lot of it changes between chapters, like again, for the talk... Jesus Christ! That was a loud wave! Again, for the talk show host, there is a set person asking questions on the radio and a set person answering, and there are set names that the questions are referring to. So in that chapter, there's more of a one-to-one interpretation, but in other chapters, you are going to go mad. And also, the characters in that chapter don't necessarily carry on to other chapters. They might, I might have missed it. Again, this is the first reading, but that would be my advice on how to. So I'm at Maggie Park right now, I believe that's the name, and we used to call this Scyther Park because during Pokemon Go days, there was a ton of Scyther at this park for no reason. Okay, so let's talk about some of the linguistic games that you see throughout the novel. So, in the chapter with the radio broadcast game show, what Joyce does is that he'll do this stupid thing where he'll have these long, just detailed exposition heavy questions going like, who is this person who goes to the park, this park, who gets this bread at this day, has a floral dress, has 3 cousins, just long, very seemingly pedantic and stupid questions. And then the narrator will say, oh, this guy. He'll just say a name like, yep, that's it. Or they'll go, or there's one section it's notorious for being like a multi-page question for a one-word answer. And at first, it's just kind of funny and tongue-in-cheek. But then I realized, like, oh, wait a minute. Crap, I'm getting to actually know these characters. And this is one of the few times in the novel where there is heavy-set characterization. Through asking through these questions, you're getting to know the person. So, just use a dumb example for me. Who is the YouTuber with long hair who reviews a lot of dirty, smut literature and has crappy audio on his videos for a long time? It's like, oh, it's Bookshore. And it's like, oh yeah, correct. And just imagine that, but if you get a lot more personal with my life, which I'm not going to do right now, and then you start to get to know the characters in a way that I don't know if I've never seen before. Generally, when there's a character introduction, it's the character's name first, and then you slowly get to know them through their actions or descriptions. And to see the reverse of this was pretty cool. There was another chapter in the novel where he uses, it's kind of like the Umberto Eco, Joseph McElroy approach, where you use one element as a jumping off point, whether it be like a theme or a genre choice. Like, so in the name of, no, in the Prague Cemetery, it's about finding this potential person who's in his house that is writing these notes as well. Oh, and Lookout Cartridge is about finding a lost movie that hasn't been finished yet. And these are just more genre elements just to kind of give a basic structure so they can just go and talk about whatever they want to. And what I noticed in the chapters, that's what it's really going for. And that's when I really realized just to let the story take hold and guide you. So what I think a wrong way to jumping into this novel is looking for that theme throughout the chapter and continually going for it. The chapter is going to guide you where it guides you, and it's going to jump all over the place. And even though these chapters might have set themes, that's not the thing to worry about. Even with the radio question, that's probably one of the more direct chapters, but just let the questions guide you wherever they may guide you. This chapter where there's random dialogue just for like a half a page, just out of nowhere, and you're like, what the hell, who are these two people? Actually, a great section that is a good litmus test for understanding this novel is in the first chapter, the trip to the museum. That is just pretty straightforward and filled with puns and kind of indicative of the rest of the novel, even though there are a lot of changes, but it gives you a good baseline where a little girl and her family go to a museum and they see the battle, one of Napoleon's battles. And there's a lot of funny puns in there, like his big white horse, his big white horse, his big white arse, because it's Harsce. A great example of the puns. Also Jenny's, Jinnes, which if it's some French battle name, I'm thinking it refers to genie as well. And you get another one with a Hindu, Hinnoo, obviously referencing the Hindu. So you see where the line of action is the family going through the museum physically, but also the line of action is the Battle of Waterloo. And you get those funny alliterations that you get throughout the whole novel, which maybe I'm just remembering it wrong, but for me, they kind of seem to start with T's, like T, tali, T, ta, 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 and you see some of those in there. And this is just a great section just to see if Finnegans Wake is your bag. It's like if I had to teach a class on Finnegans Wake, this would be the chapter I would dissect because, again, it's the most accessible in terms of action and it's just a great baseline. The first page, not so much. That's a lot more complicated. Next part I want to get at is this is a dream, but is this a dream or is this like a literary dream? Kind of like if you watch a movie and they have the dream sequence, it's not really like a dream sequence. The medium of the movie is more or less taking over how dreams are played out and whatnot. Now, is the medium of the book influencing this to a degree where this is like not actually a dream and just kind of like a loose concept? Yes or no? Oh no, and no. So, it is a dream, and it just pretty faithful to a dream in that it jumps around like crazy. Like I talked about, characters, subject matter switch, timeline switch, focus switch, place switch, space switch. So sometimes you are in Dublin Island. You're in an exact spot. You're talking to exact people, and you're in a place in Dublin Island and having an experience walking down the street or in a bar. And sometimes you're like talking about the alphabet and how it's switching to the prank queen in the prehistory of Ireland, or listening to a soliloquy by a character who's going over the history of Ireland, themes of religion, and just the ocean. Much like in the beginning paragraph where it's going through the different currents that go through Ireland and Irish effect on culture through even into the Americas. So it has that weird dreamlike sense, but it also isn't dreamlike in the sense where who the hell dreams like this? Nobody is this erudite about their dreams. So the over processing of information within this novel, yeah, it's indicative that the medium of literature is shining through a lot of it, but it does strike that nice counterbalance of what dreams are actually experienced. Another thing too is that you'll see these big words. Like one of them is one of the most famous, the longest word in the English language, the boom, crackle, blah, 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 in the first page of this novel, replicating thunder. There's a theory, and I do think it holds a lot of credence to it, in that the outside ambience of the sleeper is affecting the dream and the narrative within the novel. You see thunder crashes throughout the novel's entirety, and it changes. And sometimes it's just noise, and sometimes it's like a really high pun or a ton of words strung together. Also, there's constant references to an earwig, which is thought to be an earwig, the sleeper's ear. I don't want to say narrator because he's not the narrator. It's a character, but whoever is the sleeper is very unclear throughout this novel and might not even be designated. But these outside things like water dripping, the wind outside, they are all affecting the narrative within the novel. However, we talked to my friend Anthony about this. When I talked to him about the cyclical nature of the novel, he said, well, dreams aren't cyclical. And that's actually a very great point. What kind of dream is never ending and constantly repeating itself? Maybe like a whole coma dream, but that is not present or consistent within dreams as well. The medium is influencing how dreams are seen and affected in this novel, and it's not trying to be a one-to-one realistic representation, but also it does a good job with the fluidity of dreams and persons in it. I've had a dream one time where like I was fighting somebody. I think I was fighting Zuko, and then I was Zuko from Avatar: Last Airbender, and like I think people have that with like you're a person and you're a completely different person, and then you know you yourself, and sometimes the space stays the same, but the person switches, or you switch to a completely different space with the same person, or both at the same time.
Soft morning city lisp. I am leafy, spiffing lip, full tea and faulty all the nights have fallen too long my hair. Not a sound falling lisping.
Again, the name Finnegans Wake comes from an Irish bar song about a drunkard who dies and then he comes back to life because they pour alcohol on him. And this concept of song is really prevalent throughout this novel. It's a very, very lyrical novel. As you heard from Delany speaking at the beginning, or Christopher Robinson doing his banjo tune of one of the last passages in the novel, you can see how well it fits to a song format. And that in turn is really helpful because getting the flow of this novel is gonna make your experience a lot easier. Different chapters have different lyrical rhythms, and they are quite noticeable. There was one chapter that was like da 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 da, like. But man, the chapter went by very quickly in some respects. For this novel, there's such an intentionality to that aspect of lyricism. Now that being said, that does provide its own challenges in that, again, this is a tough novel, all the puns are crazy, and finding that lyrical rhythm that makes it go by quicker, you kind of sometimes miss a lot what's going on. There was some parts where I'm like, whoa, I'm blaring through this just because I found the rhythm of this section. So I'd find myself like, wait, what did I just read? I got the song tone of this novel and almost like the poetic structure of it, but I didn't really get what was happening on a page-to-page basis. And so then I go back and then I reread it. But the key to this novel, there's two different ways to read it. If you read it in your head versus if you read it out loud, they're totally different experiences. Sometimes when I was reading in my head, the novel felt a lot darker, versus when I read it out loud, it was a funny novel, and I found myself laughing a few times when he's making me say dumb stuff like Tim Tiblu Tubla T and stuff like that. So I'd recommend, if you're just having a tough time with a chapter, and of course, because reading out loud a 600-page book is kind of unreasonable, but this book is nothing but unreasonable. But if you're having a tough time understanding what's going on and finding your placement, read out loud. This novel is very much meant to be read out loud. The puns come across across very differently. They are a lot more noticeable, and by reading out loud, you get that lyrical rhythm to it, and it's a lot easier to find your place within this novel as well. But then that kind of goes to another thing. How should this novel be read? One of the first things I saw when I looked up this novel on Goodreads was that a guy said, I love it. I didn't understand anything. I liked making up words when I was a kid, and I love just all the crazy language I didn't bother for understanding. And for me personally, I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to actually understand what's happening on a page-to-page level. There is a valid reading experience of just having fun with the words in this novel. So if you just read it and just get the lyricism and just kind of get that poetic sense of the novel and you don't really understand anything, honestly now I do think that's a very valid way. I'm realizing that especially with this novel, there really isn't no one way to read it. There is a lot of different types of ways to read it. Again, aloud, again, in your head, again, picking apart all the small little references, looking at all the different puns. Actually, those are more for me anyways. But if you want to pick up this novel and just read it, and just let the prose take you where it takes you, that is totally valid. And also, like Ulysses, you can kind of pick up this novel wherever. The novel's cyclical, so if you just want to pick up the last chapters, which is very beautiful, if you want to look at middle stuff, or if there's like a title or description of a chapter that interests you, if you want to just go and read it, go for it. Again, this is not a set narrative novel. This is a very loose novel. So you can kind of just pick it up wherever. The benefit of reading in culmination and start to front is that you just kind of pick up the little names that come up throughout the novel and the little references and the little themes. But you're not going to get a better overall sense of the story necessarily. The main way to focus on this novel is just to kind of get an idea of what the events are on the page. So what I came away with that is that maybe this novel is not as inaccessible as people say. It is very difficult, and I wouldn't recommend an average and even intermediate reader pick this up necessarily, but the barrier of entry is not that bad, because if you're going for a complete understanding on every single topic on this novel, that's still a big debate even amongst Joyce fans and Joyce historians and scholars. So just pick it up where you want to be. If you're an intermediate reader, just pick up a section. Just try to read 20 pages. And if you're left feeling like, dude, what is this? I hate this. That's totally fine too. I picked up this novel. I hated it. But yeah, I think the thing is just go with the novel. Whatever you feel is happening on the page, just embrace that. And there's been a few things when I checked out rereading, I was like, wait a minute, I thought this happened here, but not necessarily. This is a novel that's meant to be understood through multiple rereadings. So yeah, just get through it the first time, or just read specialized passages. Warning, this next section is only going to be for dumb nerds, so we're going to talk about genre, so if that does not interest you, go ahead and skip to the next section. So, I do want to talk about genre of this book because when I was first looking into Finnegans Wake, I read something, I think it was on Wikipedia, saying that Ulysses is modernism, while Finnegans Wake is postmodernism. And there's truths and falsities to both of those, in my opinion. I mean, Ulysses is modernism. Let's not get mixed up here. But with Finnegans Wake specifically, I am going to be a fence sitter and firmly plant myself like Humpty Dumpty and say it's both. Now, you have to give it to some degree that this is a modernist novel and that subject matter and setting switch on a dime. This is the most stream of consciousness novel I've ever read, except maybe just for automated fiction, like surrealist fiction. But now, the thing that does kind of miss from this novel is that even though Dublin is, again, the prime narrative source of this novel, it's not really a novel about Dublin, where Ulysses is firmly planted in Dublin, and Joyce is going for the effect of writing about Dublin is writing about everyone. It's more in the reverse in this sense for the novel, where he's trying to write about everything and using Dublin as an anchor for himself. And when you look at his use of language and drawing from various languages, drawing from various different cultures throughout the world, it's really tough to say that this is a Dublin-centric novel, even though Dublin does pop out throughout it. When you compare that to other authors like Virginia Woolf, where the setting is even more closed in, yeah, this is just way too open and maximal for, in that sense, to be a modernist novel. Now, where it does excel in postmodernism and in terms of pastiche and high culture and low culture mixing, he does an amazing job on that. By the way, this is paint, don't worry. And so he'll include things such as the history of Ireland, the saints, and combine it with what essentially was kind of meme culture for the time. I know that's going to make a lot of people cringe, but hear me out. Kind of like how in The Tunnel, Gas has a heavy use of limericks, which is definitely seen as low culture, especially at the time. Joyce has a heavy use of fairy tale. Humpty Dumpty is a core aspect of this novel and is referenced throughout. The Golden Goose is one of the narrative anchors for one of the chapters in this novel as well. And while nowadays we probably hold those a lot more reverence than maybe we should, with stuff like the collection of the Grimm fairy tales being told to everybody, that being, when people start getting into literature, that's one of the first things they pick up, being adapted into Disney films and everything, it probably was seen as a lot more of low culture at the time, along with limericks and everything. This wasn't high culture at that designation. It's probably seen as something possibly a bit more disposable. Now, I haven't done research into this, so I could be off about that, but that would be my guess. It would be like including Slender Man into like your story nowadays. So he does do that pastiche of high and low culture. Now, well, maybe it fails in the postmodern sense is the idea of relativity. Relativity is an aspect of this novel in that it's a dream and the shifting aspects and what the novel is actually trying to get at. But there's not that moral relativity that you would see in a Pynchon novel. It's questioning the morals of our society. Joyce is not really concerned with that aspect within this novel. So again, that's why I kind of have to say it's kind of a modernist novel and it's kind of a postmodernist. It also kind of shows that these terms they do have a use, but they're kind of dumb. To say that it's a 20th century novel is a much better description because it encompasses all these aspects from the late 20th century and the early 20th century within this novel as well. Probably leaning a bit more to the early 20th century. So, I feel like I might have missed a lot in this review, and again, this review book is very, very difficult. I'm glad that I was able to understand what I was able to understand in it, and I feel like I was able to decently follow the action within the page. But for my next reading of this book, and there will be multiple, I am going to go over a lot more of the references that other people have seen. I'm going to take it chapter by chapter and really dissect it. Also, I'm gonna really need to read section 3 because that whole part was a wash. But most people I've talked to, Delany and my friend Christopher Robinson, they're both like, yeah, I've only understood like 10% of that book. It's a very impenetrable book in some ways and accessible in other ways as well. And let's talk about the final section. Because, this book is cyclical. It's one of the things it's most famous for, and when I was reading section 4, I experienced something I haven't experienced in a long time. It was one of the most beautiful passages I've read in literature, if not the most beautiful ending. I don't know everything that was going on within the page because it was more like prose poetry in some regards, but the feelings that it gave me are the feelings of the ocean, of when you think about the huge mountains beneath the sea and how expansive the sea goes and how deep the seafloor is and we don't know everything about it. And it gave me the feeling of when I first started listening to classical music specifically Chopin when I listen to his etudes, or when I listen to Debussy or Leo Ornstein, and just that huge, almost like wealth of knowledge that I felt I was at the precipice of, and just how beautiful that was. Or when I first started reading really difficult literature, I haven't really felt that since like my early 20s, and at 31, it was incredible to feel that again from a novel. And Delany gave me some advice to, when you finish reading it, read more of the beginning again because it does circle around really well. And I got a very, very different feel from the beginning, while the end of section 4 started, particularly more at the end, started to feel a lot like night and things were coming to a close. The beginning of the novel started to feel like people were waking up, and you can kind of see that where, when it turns dawn, not everybody's totally steering it, or you might see cars moving. It felt like that where it was going off of the ocean imagery from the last section, but then eventually it goes to the image of a town, and the town felt like waking up, and then the actions of the people started happening, and people's days started going, and that's when you get Finnegans' part of the story actually start to happen. And it was so damn beautiful. Like, it's been what I've been missing in literature a lot. I haven't been reading as much lately because I've just been running into books that I just don't like very much. And to read this novel and this ending, I really have no criticisms for the book. The only one is that it's hard, but I don't feel like that's a proper criticism. That's what the intention of the book was, and it's hard in a way that's very rewarding and taxing in a fair way. It's probably going to be one of my favorite books. I know I'm doing more read-throughs. It definitely will be. But this also cements for me the fact that Joyce is probably the best author. And everything after Joyce, all the maximal literature books, and all the books that take place within a day, go try to do literary games and tricks, like from The Tunnel, from The Disconnected, from A Naked Singularity. All these books are within the shadow of Joyce. Or at least 90% of them. This man did this pre-internet, at a time where you did still have to go to libraries or collect your own library collection, and what he did was absolutely incredible. And I don't know how many hundreds of years it's going to be until somebody else tops it. So if you read Finnegans Wake, let me know. Thank you so much for listening. I will reread this. I think I'll reread all of Joyce eventually too. And time for my really hipster story. So, I went to Africa last year, Malawi specifically, as you've seen some images in the review. And I had an overnight layover in Dar es Salaam, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is just a few countries above Malawi. I was sitting there, and it was a really strange airport. I went to this back room kind of place. It was funny. There was airport music playing, and what I mean by that is that there was an ambient composer who made songs for an airport. And I show my friend, it's like, oh, that's the composer I'm talking about. Well, so it's a famous ambient composer. And then I'm reading Finnegans Wake there, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, this is the douchiest, most hipster experience I probably ever have in my life with literature, where I'm reading Finnegans Wake in Dar es Salaam at midnight with famous ambient music playing over me. I'll never reach that. And then the stupidest thing happened to me. I go to the place where I can start boarding the plane, and the person asks me, like, do you have a visa? What? You know you're supposed to have a visa, right? Oh, I didn't know. Like, well, why didn't you apply for one? Because I'm stupid? Malawi's like one of the 40 countries or so that don't accept the American passport as is, and you have to get a visa. And I was like, oh god, I just did 30 hours of flying, I'm gonna go back to America. Luckily, I was able to buy one in Malawi, so I got there. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and have a great day.